Mark, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about how would you describe Ford's motivations for fostering mindfulness at work?
Well, it's interesting because, the story, you think of an old smokestack business like Ford, been in business since 1903, founded by, albeit an American icon and innovator, Henry Ford. And he set a very interesting tone, and he did it really through the example of what he created. Henry Ford believed that the intention of making everyday people's lives better was fundamental to his work. And you only have to look at the example of the Model T to realize that, that here was a technology that gave Americans the freedom of mobility that they had never known before. I mean, before the Model T was introduced, most people in this country had never been more than 25 miles away from their homes. Mm-hmm. So it really unlocked, an incredible amount of human potential by, certainly we're seeing this today, just down the road in Silicon Valley, but way back then, it was an enormous shift, in the capacity and the ability for people to really live their lives more fully. So this focus on helping people really has been carried forth today by Henry Ford's great-grandson, Bill Ford, who's the executive chairman of Ford. And Bill believes, and we're going to talk more about kind of his belief system and how this works and plays back into mindfulness, that a business, any success that Ford realizes is fundamentally linked to the depths of its humanity as an organization. And so what we're going to talk about today is really not so much about the metrics, because Ford's not creating metrics around mindfulness yet. But we're going to hear about company values, which I've partially described, and really how they both intersect and are empowered by personal values that I think of creating the capacity and space for Ford to begin this journey to mindfulness.
Can you say a little bit more about Bill's personal values and how those sort of fold into the endeavor to introduce mindfulness or bring mindfulness into Ford?
Bill's, and I should say full disclosure, Bill is a lifelong friend of mine. We've known each other since we were about that high. And so, I have this wonderful opportunity to work with the company, but it really is personal in my life as well as a friend and a colleague. But Bill's journey to mindfulness really began quite indirectly. In college, he became quite, and if you know anything about Bill's work, as it relates to the company and its introduction of electrified vehicles and this sustainability effort that's been going on now for about 10 years, Bill became quite motivated and inspired by the natural world. As a child and ultimately, in college, he really recognized that was fundamental to what he was interested in and what he wanted to sort of manifest in his life. Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, when he got out of college, he went to work for this big old line, smokestack business, and he was confronted with, a dichotomy. This is what he believed as a person, mm-hmm. and where his heart was, and yet this is where his family legacy resided. And in fact, one of the first days, he joined the board of directors in the late 80s. And one of his first board meetings, he remembers being told quite strictly that he was told to stop associating with any known or suspected environmentalists. So, thankfully that was advice he summarily ignored. But anyway, but this decision, made him really think about how do I reconcile his deeper personal values with those of this enormous company that that didn't have, frankly, a great environmental record, that did build cars that did not help our environment. And so this led Bill to a decision to really make his own humanity central to the leadership and the legacy that he would create at Ford. And he had a wonderful opportunity to, let me just connect the dot here. So, as he, through his 20s and 30s in his career at Ford, the reconciliation of his personal values to his work really led him to mindfulness in a personal practice, in a personal way. And along the path, he met Jack Kornfield. And Jack and Bill have been friends for a long time. And Jack called him up, in the fall of 2012 and said, "Hey, I'm doing this conference over in San Francisco. Do you want to come and talk about mindfulness?" And Bill said, "Well, I kind of don't do that. I mean, it's a kind of personal thing for me." But Jack was very persuasive, and many of you know Jack. And so Bill actually went and spoke at Wisdom 2.0. I think we've got a clip for that now.
I think at the end of the day, metrics are always important in a business, and they have to be, because you have to be able to measure success. But I also think you can model humanity in a way that people can pick up on. I mean, I think that the nature in corporations are that, people will mimic what they see above them in terms of the hierarchy. And whether that's a good or bad thing, it's a reality. And I've come to realize that over the years. And so, when I choose, the next generation of leaders, to me, behaviors is, certainly equally important and never less important than skill and ability. Because I've seen a lot of really skilled, metric-driven executives make just and Ariana talked about that this morning. Some of the brightest people in the world make some of the worst decisions. And I think it's because they've completely lost touch or shut out humanity.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. I mean, it really speaks to this idea of showing up in your full authentic self. And it really feels like a kind of dismantling of this idea of divorcing emotions from business, like the don't take it personally, it was a business decision kind of mentality, really isn't valid.
Yeah,
and
I think
in
that's a
fact,
myth.
it's all personal. And the extent to which life, delivers us slings and arrows and difficult moments, we have to sort of relate to those, and mindfulness can be a strategy for helping us handle those situations in a way that doesn't end up sort of creating more harm in the world or in the business context. So on that note, what is Ford really doing now? Are there programs or are there things happening in the company that are helping kind of this mindfulness revolution, as Dacher put it?
So it's beginning. These are early days. I mean, we have an enormous, multinational global company that has hundreds of thousands of employees around the world, and as many of us would expect, this is not mindfulness. Is not something that necessarily is in the cultural vocabulary of a big company like that. But this is where I think it's so interesting, because this is where the personal collides with the corporate. That clip we just watched, at Wisdom, Bill's talk at Wisdom, was really, for him, it really unlocked a sense of possible. A sense of what was possible, of the possibility. And so, he and a very small team of people kind of got together and said, how can we sort of create a conversation around this? Because, he does not want to deliver a top-down edict. He's not that kind of a leader, and B, he really believes that by inviting people, into the conversation and letting them find their way, that these things can grow really from the bottom up. But he created kind of the space and the permission for this to happen. And, we were very lucky because of, sort of past relationships and introductions to meet Rich Fernandez and his team at Wisdom Labs. And they came and helped Ford really come down the path and begin this journey. And so just on a kind of a granular level, what happened was that after the talk at Wisdom 2.0, Ford returned to the same conference over these past 2 years, in 14 and 15 this year, and just to listen and learn and just see kind of what was this all about. And a group of people from the company, who literally thought they landed on Mars. I mean, this was just not this was not sort of in their corporate lexicon. They got really inspired, and they went back to Dearborn and they founded a book club. And this has been going on for 2 years, and there's been this book club where a group of folks will get together and read a mindfulness book and discuss it on Tuesdays at noon. Yeah. And so some people around the company and started paying attention to this, and it led to a group of leaders saying, maybe this is something, that we're hearing kind of the patter of feet. This is something that we need to pay attention to. And interestingly, in parallel, there was, talk about crazy serendipity, a contractor of Ford of Canada, which is a separate entity, albeit, a part of the company, was putting on a leadership retreat, and this contractor happened to go to a mindfulness seminar, was inspired. She was asked to create content for this leadership retreat, and I got a phone call saying, we've got this mindfulness group, this person in Canada wants to do a mindfulness thing, do you have any ideas? And I said, yeah, we do. And so we connected Rich, the Wisdom Labs team, with Ford of Canada people. And my God, the bravery of this, sometimes it needs to happen. We all know this. It needs to happen sort of outside, the core. Mm-hmm. This group from Canada got together, put on this mindfulness experience for these leaders, and it was incredible, the receptivity that happened with it. Rich, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's multifaceted because it started with dealers were brought through a learning tour of Silicon Valley, and they wanted to hear about mindfulness. So we gave a talk about mindfulness, dealers, right, in Canada. And then it was actually the CEO of Canada and her leadership team that said, we should bring this to our market, which, by the way, is not an insignificant market. I think it's the second or third largest market in Ford. We were amazed at the reception, full house, and the most amazing thing is we had very strongly advocated for the fact that whatever we offered needed to be offered in doses over time. Because as many of you know, sustaining a practice is so difficult, right? And we're challenged, each of us, myself, I'll speak for myself, every day. It's, sometimes a challenge to actually do these practices. So what we did was we said, let's work together for 6 months. And let's have live events, let's have webinars, let's have e-learning to just enable sustainable skill development and progressive skill development. And we told them we're going to do this learning pathway, basically, that takes you from very basic mindfulness all the way through compassion and loving kindness. But it's a progressive skill build over time, so you need to hang with us for all of that, please. And they've just been great partners, and we had really wonderful results. And then that's the type of thing now we're going to be replicating in HQ with Dearborn and a lot of the C-level executives and leaders there. So it's about, I think, building a groundswell and really not compromising on the full spectrum of mindfulness and compassion. This is one thing that I want to emphasize, as I did in my talk, right? Because we were very clear, we're going to be talking about compassion as a good leadership and business practice.
So it was really the ability or the willingness for Ford, which is a people-oriented company, and has a leader, who really has these, deep compassionate values, to be open and be curious, to say, maybe there's something here and let's go check it out. It was it was both serendipitous and inspired. That really is how this whole journey has begun. And, from an HR perspective, what has kind of like the light bulb that's gone on is that mindfulness can be a means to foster innovation and productivity. And then from an employee, and Rich is seeing this in his work, from an employee perspective, mindfulness is a tool to manage stress and enhance day-to-day well-being. So there's really, both employees from, me, myself as an employee, although I'm not, but if I was a Ford employee, how do I feel about being at work, and how do I show up on the personal side? And then to complement that, on the HR side, how can we help our employees be better and to live better for the business? And
I would add one other thing, and we've talked about this, so this is no surprise, but it also activates company values. I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here.
No, not at all.
But, again, I'm coming back to that word compassion. Why should a business have core values around compassion? What does that look like? That is something that's actually valued at Ford, right? The ability to see the whole person, for example. And so this set of tools and practices that we're roughly calling mindfulness, but I'll also include compassion practices, serve to activate and operationalize these very important company values.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, and I just, you're reminding me of Richie's four main constituents, and one of them being generosity.
Yeah.
All right, and we're talking about mindfulness and well-being, and if generosity is instrumental to well-being, generosity and compassion, I feel, are very much overlapping Venn diagrams. Okay, great. HR perspective, employee well-being perspective. I'm convinced and I'm inspired at what you guys are doing. Is there anything in the cards for sort of the connections with society? If I go to a dealership as a consumer, am I going to experience something as a result of this?
Well, this is, I mean, and Rich, great segue, and yes, the answer is yes, because it's interesting because it's not like, okay, mindfulness is cool, it's starting to happen at Ford, how can we apply that to the dealers? Yes, that came up, in the work of the last 9 months. But the dealership model, as a business model, the dealership problem has been going on for a long time. Everyone knows. I mean, so show of hands. How many of you have ever bought a car? Yeah, that was kind of a cheat question. Okay, but here's the one I really want to kind of know the answer to this too. Of those who have bought a car, how many of you had a particularly human and warm and wonderful experience doing it? Yes, thank you, about 3 people. You're the lucky ones. So this, of course, is an industry-wide challenge, and one that Ford has been acutely aware of for a long time, long before the word mindfulness ever got uttered inside the halls of world headquarters in Dearborn. And so Ford, again, because of its people values, has really been trying to address this question of how do we bring that sense of humanity right to the interface with the customer, right at the point of Ford as a company and its products meeting society, meeting the market. And so Ford has started, it's now about, I think, 4 or 5 years going, an in-house program called the Consumer Experience Movement. And what this is, it's actually very simple. It's a coaching program that allows, that helps dealer employees become more sensitive and empathic to their own team members. I mean, as we all know, dealerships are in sort of self-contained businesses that are all franchised, and work to sell the products of the Ford Motor Company, but they are all independent businesses. And so these companies have their own HR challenges within their teams. So how can we help those team members treat each other better, be more empathic, be more human together, that will, of course, then affect how they treat their customers. And so, so this is been the program. And what's interesting is that it sounds very philanthropic, but it's not. Because as Rich, you talked about earlier, this obviously serves the bottom line. You treat people better around you, you treat your customers better, the business does better. I mean, in some ways, it's a really cool, virtuous circle. So Ford is taking the notion of the transaction, one that's universally hated and uncomfortable for most people, buying a car, and trying to imbue that experience with greater humanity. And I have a video that I brought from Ford that is a corporate video. So in all fairness, these are actors in this video. It's not like these are real people. But it sort of sets up. Did I just say that?
Yeah, you said that.
Sorry,
you said that out loud.
Thank you. That's why we're here, to
actors in the room.
make mistakes like that. These are obviously these people are participating in this production to send a message that the story tells about I think, and this touched me because it really shows the intention of this company about how Ford can think about its role both as a team and as a company and ultimately to the customer in a different way. So anyway, let's look at the real people.
This is a good way to end the talk. So here we go.
So what that says to me personally, is that we all know these people. We know people like that. And there are a whole bunch of people we don't know who have stories like that. And if we as a society, we as people in the workplace, we who live in existing companies can remember that kind of stuff, or pay attention and ask and be willing and able, have the capacity to go deeper, then I think there's a lot we can accomplish together.
And we know that some of this happens from the inside out. And so that's the offer here for the mindfulness and compassion programs and initiatives with these results. So I think that's really
Bravo.
Yeah.